Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Reviewing Vintage Video Games. Today we're going to talk about a video game that was released back in 2005 and it didn't quite get what it deserved. It was based on a movie. The movie itself was released back in 1979 and the movie itself wasn't a great hit, but the video game was excellent and had a lot to say. Such a shame it didn't get what it deserved, and it wasn't quite popular or famous back in 2005, despite the fact it was one of the best video games ever made in terms of fighting. Well, the video game is called The Warriors, a Rockstar Games video game developed by one of the studios of Rockstar Games with a red sign, which we didn't get much video games from that studio. This video game had a lot of unique items, had much to say, had lots of things to present. This video game, in terms of storytelling, level design, and gameplay, was quite a masterpiece. And it even get a really good Metacritic point. I think this video game is a must-play video game, though some actually reviews gave a low point to this video game, but most of the reviews said this video game is fascinating, and they all agreed that this video game is a must-play video game of Rockstar Games. Trying to give you a sight of this video game, trying to give you a vision of this video game. This video game is the father of The Bully, another Rockstar Games video game released back in 2007. It has the same mechanisms, it actually has the same vibes, but this time in 1979 with a more serious atmosphere, with a more serious environment, and with different story, and this time it's not an open world video game. Well, getting to the business of gameplay and trying to talk about the gameplay of this video game has a lot to say. Starting from fighting mechanisms, which is this what this video game is about, fighting. Well, this game actually gives you lots of options. There is the environment, there is the enemy, and there is you. And you get to decide how to take your enemy down. You can use whatever you find against your enemy. You can find a melee weapon like a pipe or a wood stick on the ground and use it against your enemy. You can actually pick up a brick or a glass bottle and use it against your enemy. This will actually turn the tides real good, especially when you use a weapon, a melee weapon that you actually find on the ground. At the same time, you might want to actually disarm your enemies and use their own weapons against them. You might want to smash their head into the wall. Just hit them real good and hit their head to the wall. The possibilities are limitless. And depending on the enemy that you have, you'll actually get to decide how to act. Sometimes you want to grab your enemies, but sometimes the enemies are hard to grab and hard to actually disarm. Then you get to decide and to use different combo hits to actually take your enemies down. Well, this whole fighting mechanisms leave you with different options that you choose, and all of them are really entertaining. Actually will make you want to try this video game more than once. Not only actually saying, okay, I finished it once, I've actually was entertained and I won't get entertained anymore. No, that's not the case, because sometimes you want to try a different approach in order to take your enemies down, and you see sometimes one approach was better than the other, and you can actually dominate your enemies in that case. Well, not all the time you get to actually fight your enemies. Sometimes you have to actually have a different approach. And that different approach could be running. Sometimes all you gotta do is run. Run for your life because there are too many of them and you cannot deal with them. The good thing about Rockstar Games is that Rockstar Games tries to actually give you realistic experience so that you can actually have a good communication with the environment of the video game. So the enemies are not dummies. So if you see five enemies attacking you and you're only one person, you better run because if you stay there, they will actually hit you. And uh, even if they cannot kill you and knock you down, they surely can lower your HP to the level that you cannot even hit one or two people. So, setting your strategy is really an important thing. And that's why I say you can actually communicate with the environment and you can get a good connection with the video game and with the gameplay because the option is not always go right in there head on and kill your enemy. Sometimes, sometimes it's about trying to actually go stealth, not to go head on. The same thing actually goes in this video game as well. One really good thing about this video game, which same thing we have in the bully, is the interactions you make. Well, the interactions in this video game are a little bit more limited than the bully. You might actually have experienced Bully, the video game, which is another Rockstar Games production. Well, in that video game, which is a famous and popular video game, we have lots of interactions. Same interactions are actually in this video game as well. But, this video game not being an open world video game is likely to have less interactions and more limited interactions. But the interactions for a not open world video game is fascinating and really entertaining. And they are functional. Like the interactions are not the interactions you actually make for fun. Sometimes you have to make those interactions. If you don't make them, the video game will actually turn really difficult because you won't actually uh, unlock some particular actually abilities throughout the video game if you actually do not make those interactions. Well, try to make some examples of these interactions or hobos. If you actually give money to some of them hobos, they might fight for you, like against your enemies. Sometimes they will actually uh, reveal the location of a spray sellers or flash sellers. Flash is something that you can use in order to actually increase your HP. And you can actually increase your vigor as well with a flash. And at the same time, there are some side activities that are not mandatory to do them, but if you do them, you can actually unlock brass knuckles, you can actually unlock handcuffs, but you cannot actually do some missions without handcuffs. You cannot do some missions without brass knuckles because brass knuckles actually increase your hit points. Means that you will uh, give your enemies more damage by hitting them. Not necessarily grabbing them, but just hitting them with different hitting combos. Well, the possibilities of side activities and the awards they give you, all of these things have made the environment of this video game really live and really communicatable. Well, as I mentioned before, stealth is a part of the video game, and the stealth is not part of the most of the video game. It's just a single small part of the video game, but the attention to the details in terms of the stealth was really interesting. Like, there are 2 or 3 missions you have to go stealthily because there are too many enemies out there and you are not seeing any flash sellers out there to buy some flash to increase your HP back to where it was. So you might want to decide not to go head on and try to hit your enemies and try to hide from them. Well, you can actually slit their throats with a knife. You can actually bash their heads with a brick or a glass bottle. So just imagine yourself being in that position. Being in that position, hiding in the shadows, and that person is trying to find you and calling you different things, like you're so coward and all. They don't say you're coward. There is some curse words, which I don't want to use now. But all the possibilities that you have in order to deal with that enemy in that situation is just fascinating. Like, imagine you can use a brick, you can use a glass bottle, or instead you can hit that enemy in the back with your fist, and or maybe you can choke them. So all of these possibilities for a fighting video game is really interesting, and you cannot turn a blind eye to that. Other thing that really actually fascinated me and was fantastic is the teamwork you get. It's not only you, the big shot, who actually can deal with everyone. You cannot deal with everyone. You have to have some people around you that will actually offer you some help. And these are your teammates. Well, your actually gang or your teammates, whatever you call them, will help you deal with your enemies. As I mentioned before, your enemies are not dummies for you as a big shot to go and take care of them. You have to actually sometimes run away from them. So, what do? You actually order your teammates to scatter. By this action, you can actually run away from the police or other gangs more easily. Or maybe you want to actually tell them to vandalize everything. This way, you will actually make more money, earn more money to buy yourself flash and a spray, or maybe a knife, because there are people out there actually selling weapons like knife. Knife is a really uh, overpowered weapon in this video game. If you use them against your enemies, even the strongest of enemies can be taken down. With all these possibilities, with all these flash sellers, spray sellers, knife sellers, and with your teammates distracting other police, trying to get away from the police, and at the same time, they might get caught and you have to help them. This will give you the experience of being the warrior. You feel like you are the warrior. I remember when I was playing this video game, I felt like I am the warrior walking in the streets. There are some people who might want to attack me. Maybe there's police out there that I want to avoid. Well, it just haunts you. The video game in that situation with the possibilities, with the interactions, with the mechanism, all the things that are so realistic in this video game will actually haunt you and turn you into the warrior. And the experience that you get out of this video game will never be forgotten. And talking about level design, well, in terms of level design, this video game is not only fighting. Well, it's a fighting video game, but it's not only fighting. The good thing about it, we have boss fights. Boss fights are not just hit them with something that you have. Sometimes you have to dodge their attacks, throw some molotovs to them, burn them out. Use your environment like the boxes to actually hit them. Like some of the boss fighters, they attack you and they just try to ram you like a cow or like a bull. And by dodging them to actually wall or to a box, you can actually lower their HP, and this way you can defeat them. Sometimes two enemies with a knife attack you, and both of them are really good fighters. These are boss fights, and these boss fights are really interesting and really entertaining. Uh, each boss fight has a different uh, approach, so you have to deal with them with a different method, with a different strategy. This is what makes all the boss fights so fun. Just like many video games that took a lot of credit for their boss fights. Same thing we have for a video game like God of War. God of War is a fascinating video game. I love this video game. And it eventually took a lot of credit for the boss fights that it had. It had lots of interesting boss fights. Same goes for Warriors, but we don't have that many boss fights in this video game. The boss fights are more limited, but they are as interesting. And the whole thing not being about fighting and actually kicking your enemies or punching your enemies, sometimes you have to distract the cops and actually make them deal with your enemies. Like you distract the cop and trigger them to follow you, then you will get them to another business, get them to a trap. This way, you bring them to another gang's hideout, and this way, you will deal with your enemies by actually having cops to handcuff them. Sometimes the enemies are too many, and you have to jump from roof to another roof to actually get away from them. Actually, there's a mission just like that. All you have to do is running. There are actually not only one mission, but one of the interesting missions is all about running from rooftops. Also, there are levels that are not about fighting whatsoever. Sometimes the levels are only about throwing your enemies off a hill. Like you have to capture a hill for yourself, and actually something similar to Royal Rumble in WWE. Well, this video game has a mode by the name of Royal Rumble. Something similar to that, actually, we have it in the Warriors video game. You have to throw your enemies off the hill to the downside and be the one who is the last man standing on the top of the hill. Sometimes they want to just check you. It's a survival mode. Lots of enemies will try to attack you, and they just want you to be strong enough to actually be in their team. So lots of enemies will actually surround you, and you have to deal with them being one of the strongest men, uh, who is actually the last man standing for actually 5 minutes. And the enemies are increasing uh, each minute. Well, it's not something that we can actually put in this 12-minute or 13-minute review, or the time that we have is not enough to talk about the level design of this video game, but there are a vast variety of levels. The levels are not just about fighting and hitting your enemies, punching your enemies, kicking your enemies. Sometimes you have to do something else in order to actually make progress in this video game. Getting to a storytelling. Well, the story of this video game is a guardian angel. It's simply a guardian angel. You know why? Because it saved the movie itself by giving it a backstory, an excellent backstory that is quite entertaining and breathtaking all at the same time. Well, the movie itself is something. Actually, the movie itself happens in this video game as well. This Those events in the movie eventually happen at the end of this video game, and we get to do the whole movie as well. But there is a backstory. There are set of events, but in the movie itself, there is no set of events. They just said it started, it just happened. Now let's get to business. They're running, and you don't know why they're running, and you don't know who is who. And you actually cannot communicate with the characters as well. You cannot get a connection. You cannot actually try to feel the characters at all. Like the characters are unknown to you, and there is no history about them. Like the head of this gang by the name of the Warriors is actually a nobody the movie itself, but the characters of this video game, uh, you can get a really good connection to them. I myself personally loved Ajax. Ajax was a tough kid, actually calling other people wimps and being this strong man with a lot of testosterone and with all the muscles and the strength. So I loved him so much. And there are other characters, we have the coolest of them all. We have the person who actually does this spraying and is actually a dork who cannot quite fight. We get to see them all and we get to see their different fighting styles. Ajax is like kickboxing all the time, being the tough kid. Uh, Another character does kung fu, and another one does some random punches and random kicks. Another one is good at wrestling and grappling and all. There are different fighting styles for each character, and there are different stories for each character. There are some side missions that you can actually experience by the name of flashbacks. You go and flashback to the story of each of the characters. So this video game has done a real good job reviving the characters and giving them a soul. Now they're not just a nobody that are just running and kicking and punching every now and then. They have a history, and you know their history when they actually joined the gang, what bad things they did, what were actually in which sides they were actually weak, in which parts they were actually strong. You know their strength, you know their weakness. You really get to feel the characters by this backstory that we have. Not only that, there are some random gangs in the movie itself, that you don't know them, that you quite are not familiar with them. But you get to know all the gangs of the movie and see how strong they are. Some of them are stronger, some of them are really tough, and you cannot deal with them easily. And some of them are just some dorks. You can actually hit them real easy, like the orphans. But in the movie, you don't get to know the orphans. You don't get to know other gangs. But in this video game, you get to actually feel other gangs, actually fight against them. And sometimes you don't fight against them. Maybe you will be friends and all. But uh, after all, you get to feel them, you get to know them, and actually choose your favorite gangs. Like the hi hats. What hi hats are actually something we didn't even hear in the movie. Nothing about them. They're just some random people doing pantomime or something. But you get to know them. See how dangerous these hi hats are. They're just not some people doing some pantomime or looking like a French person. They are some real serious people and really dangerous. They actually use knife. All of them have knives in their back, and they're not easy to deal with. And their boss is the worst, and one of the uh, hardest bosses of all the time. So overall, the thing that I want to say and get a conclusion out of it is that with a backstory like this, not only the movie itself was saved, you get to experience being a member of a gang by the name of the Warriors and being the true warrior and feeling how it is to be amongst the warriors and fighting against other gang members. Well, when all's said and done, at the end of this review, this video game didn't get what it deserved. Well, the reasons are quite unknown. One reason could be that this game was never released for PC and the platforms of this video game is limited. It was only for PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 and PSP, not available in most of the platforms. Maybe that's why this video game didn't get famous enough or popular enough. But the same goes for, well, I think that is not an excuse. Maybe the advertising was weak because the God of War itself was only released for PSP and PlayStation 2, nothing else. But it's such a famous and popular video game. Well, the reasons are quite unknown, and it's so sad to think that this video game didn't get quite what it deserved. One of the most underrated video games of history, we can call this video game. Thank you all for watching, and subscribe us for more vintage content in terms of video games. Have a nice day, y'all. Goodbye.